SSLP, the album that started it all.
I am not joking when I say this is one of the best hip-hop albums ever made.
This album might not be totally perfect, there might be a skit that slows the masterpiece down slightly, but the beast still plows forward, and way ahead of its opposition. It was super relevant too. But that was in 1999. However, no one agrees that this work has aged that well, particularly in today's climate. But alas, it is a certified classic. It is one of the best feats, one of the best introductions into any artist in media ever. It is the best example that shock value can work, and I should say that this batch of songs has a legacy that can go toe-to-toe with other media from the horror genre, arguably where media containing the element of nastiness and shock resides. For instance, this project had the same exact cultural impact as movies such as The Shining, the obvious difference being SSLP was a groundbreaking addition to the landscape of horror in music, not film. It had the same cultural impact the end of Evangelion had on Japanese audiences a few years prior. Although dated, Eminem's debut is still regarded as a good album and piece of media throughout the world. It is a demon's collection of songs, a devil's project, a spectacular abortion from the hellhole that is Detroit, now coming back to take revenge on its mama, the world that tried to rid it. I am not referring to the abortion being the album but instead the monster who is Slim Shady. That's what young, upcoming rapper, Marshall Mathers, wants you to believe on this collection of hits and lore that ranges from black comedy and witty pop tunes, to sad symphonies that expand into his life of hopelessness and hardship. An artist that dabbled in thinking outside the box and whose experimental verses proved to pass the trial of skeptics that actually understood the genius. Along with his band D12, the filthy sounds of Michigan State were perfected to the point of mainstream relevancy during the late 90s, a favorable sound that became popular with the underground crowds that dwelled in consciousness and battle rap. The perfected form of ugly, hellish rhymes seemed to be the next leading trend. The work of these artists weren't so much Nas-ilmatic as they were a middle finger in a crowd of conservative rappers. They didn't want you to empathize with the struggles of oppressed black communities. They exploited the poor, poked fun at their own situations, and their band member Slim made one of the first ultimate need to have fucked the world releases since Public Enemy in the early 90s. All in all, Eminem was a bad boy that spoke out in such a charismatic, comedic and most importantly loud way. A nasally rioter that was too big to ignore. Another reason this album works is the knowledge outside of the points I've mentioned thus far, a fact that could get lost in centuries to come as society hopefully becomes more equal and utopian. A fact that no one should forget. Mr. Mathers was a white man dabbling in a genre that had never seen many successful artists of that particular regard. As hip-hop began to get more popular on radio, the common person gradually accepted that no one that was white could possibly turn the genre on its head without failing miserably. Think Vanilla Ice. This massively boosted his don't give an F ego and image, and, is what, unfairly, plummeted him up into the mainstream. Some argue that a black man could not possibly get that kind of respect, and that is unfortunately what I believe, but the context that a white rapper had made the album gives an extra taste of bitterness to the lime, something that cannot be argued. Think Marshall Mathers. The ultimate outsider, who kills his girlfriend, who is a crackhead and rapist and alcoholic, and a rapper who isn't even the proper race. What a loser. And yet we had to watch in awe as he made tweaks to the rap game, every song he released being perfectly measured to be a bullet that pierced pop radio and the TV screens that play the MTV channel. You watched as he added a layer of context and flavor to the increasingly stale hip-hop landscape of the 90s. And you loved it. The artist that finally plummeted hip-hop to the forefront of music discussion and broke the genre into the biased mainstream of the 90s, there is a racial discussion that still definitely needs to be had. Watch as he gives you the ultimate reason why this album is so good. He is simply, but paradoxically, an exceptional rapper. That's the icing on the cake, the cherry on top. The fact is that this album is the ultimate loser anthem, but contrast this with the actual amazing talent Eminem brings. The idea, who would have thought, his next album would bring is the whole reason this album succeeds. The biggest element this album has going for it is irony. This is an album of irony. The themes, controversy, wordplay, forms the album's narrative, perfectly capturing a golden moment in media history. An album that is the best of the worst of the best. That's why Eminem in 1999 was one of the cleverest artists and musicians of all time, something that would unfortunately change. All this being said, this could definitely not be achieved if not for the brilliant production that Dr. Dre, and everyone else involved, gave this project. Every instrumental is boundary pushing, and fits flawlessly with Eminem's comedic, menacing, or melancholy reflective songs. Certainly groundbreaking for this specific period, even if it has perhaps lost its sting in today's climate, and maybe causes a few eye rolls due to how much edgelord bullshit in media we have grown to ignore and grow out of. No one can deny that, without this album, mainstream media wouldn't be how it is now. The first and only exception to lyrical miracle rappers is 1999 Eminem, and with this album, it's not hard to see why. An edgy album that people will gawk at, despite not still being a trend. A gem you will find in a time capsule. A Mona Lisa in a time of digital art. A 5 out of 5.